And without further ado, please welcome Pastor Bill Purvis.
Thank you so much, Elena. It's great to see you, and the work you do around here is certainly appreciated. For all of you that are watching as well, thank you for watching. And I also want to mention to you that my son BJ, I'm really excited about what he's about to do. He's taking off on a new venture. You've seen his face a lot as he's worked with me at BPL. Did a great job, and now he's basically said, Dad, I have some goals I want to pursue in my life. So he's stepping out in a way, beginning of the first week of May, and he's going to be opening his own business. And he'll do an outstanding job, I know. I thank God for him. And so keep him in your prayers as he does. But I just thought I'd pass that to you so that you would know, because he's the one that helped create this for you. Now today I want to talk to you about a lesson that I know will be a benefit to you. And it's something that actually I learned this and wrote this lesson when I was going through one of the biggest storms of my ministry. Those of you in ministry, you're going to need every bit of this. So I hope that you'll write it down, you'll put it aside. If you ever go through a tough time, you'll come back and refer to this. At the time that I went through this, I had realized that we were going through a financial crisis. There had been some problems we'd had that I wasn't aware of. By the time I was made aware of it, it was almost insurmountable. And so as a result of that, I had to quickly gather my head, my facts, and all the rest, and try to get a handle on it, because the ministry that we had been growing and leading for many, many years was in trouble. I'd come home, found out that we had a $755,000 debts that had accumulated, and many bills were not being paid. Some staff, we had a large staff at the time. A lot of those staff were just kind of living without any accountability. And so as a result, when I came in and found all of this, it was devastating to me. I thought the ministry was over. If you've ever felt that way, I wrote this from my heart for leadership out of that crisis. And that was, I looked back the other day and saw the notes and said, many of you may face a crisis one day, and how are you going to get through it? So I'm going to give you some ways to get through the crisis. And as I say, it was in the middle of all this that I gathered all this. So I call it crisis in the workplace, okay? Here's some principles and steps to go by if you're in the very middle of a storm at the moment. Number one, gather all the facts. Gather all the facts. The facts always lead you to the right decision. And before you react, before you respond, before you fire off what you think may be the problem, you got to ask yourself the questions: what is really happening here? And then follow and explore every area, no matter how uncomfortable it is. Learn to go through that situation by saying, at the moment, I've just got to collect information. I want to look at, overturn, uncover every single thing around me, because I want to know what happened. And if you can do that, that's the first starting place for getting through the crisis. Gather all the facts. And don't get what you think. Do questions, ask people, let everybody tell you what they think's wrong, how it got there. So gathering all the facts is going to be the starting place. Number two, when you're in the middle of the crisis, push away your feelings. It's not about you. It's about the team. It's about the organization. Don't start blaming, well, they did this, they did that, and I can't because of. Don't lose control. Don't go nuts. Just after you've gathered all the facts, you got to stop and say, now, it's my job to stay in control. It's my job to be able at this moment, in the midst of this, to keep my hand on the wheel and to do what I do, sacrificing my feelings, myself, my reputation, all I have, on making sure that the ship gets healthy again. And so if you're leading an organization where all of a sudden, and most of you are pastors, you're leading a church and all of a sudden the bottom falls out, you have a bad business meeting, you go through a difficult time, you just don't know whether you're going to be there long term or whether it's going to last. After you've gathered the facts, the biggest thing you can do is now start thinking, how do I bring them down? You are the pilot. It's your job to land that plane as safely and with less damage as possible. So that's not the time for you to say, woe is me, okay? That's the time you have to say, how do I protect them? How do I protect that church? And so that's the thing that I would do. Now, number 3, and this will be a brief lesson, but every bit of this is highly important. Put yourself on the line first. Do what you have to do, even if it's inconvenient to do. What I did here at the church, and it was very difficult. I'll be honest with you. When I realized how far in debt we were and how bad things were, and that we weren't be able to do much of all. In fact, while I was talking with my financial secretary at the time about what in the world's going on, at the very time I was talking to her, the Georgia Power people showed up to turn our lights off, and we had to talk to them and try to get them to give us at least a day because I was still gathering facts. And then the IRS, 2 agents, walked into our office and said, y'all have failed to pay payroll taxes, and they wanted to look at our books, and they looked. Unfortunately, our books were good, and we did do that part right, thank God. But I had to put myself on the line, and I'll tell you what I had to do. I took all the bills and took some dry write boards out of every Sunday school class, put the dry write boards all around my office, and I wrote the name of every person we owed money to, when we owed it, how much we owed. And then I began to start writing personal checks to every one of them. And any of them locally that I could go and see, I put them on a list, wrote their checks, drove around to 17 different vendors or organizations in the city. And many of them were church members. And I would give them a personal check and say, I'm so sorry that you were not paid. Please forgive me. Some of them were 6 months late. And they would say, Pastor, we knew you didn't know or you would have taken care of it. But that wasn't good enough that they had trust. I wanted to make sure we came through with integrity and we took care of them. And so I personally began to pay back all I could. Literally, I went through 25 years of a savings account and stocks and investments and literally took everything I had and threw it at it to slow this thing down because the boat was sinking. If we had not responded when we did, there would be no Cascade Hills today. And so that was what we did. Now, out of that, we paid back every bit, but it sure was messy. It was a total mess. I was embarrassed. In fact, what's crazy is I was broke too. I'll just tell you flat out. I was more broke then than I was when I first started ministry. My first 2 sons, when they got married, one of them got married, we had a big banquet at the country club. The other one got married, we put on a big banquet at the museum. Third one got married, we couldn't invite anyone because we didn't have any money, okay? We had a little chapel and probably 30 people showed up and it was very, very tight. Debbie and I put my house on the market, it was just a bad time. But I knew this, they trusted me as their leader, so I had to go first. And if it was going down, I had to go down with it, and you need to do that. I'm really disappointed when I talk to leaders, particularly pastors, and the moment there's a bump in the road, they pack their bags and they say, God called me somewhere else. No, God called you there in season and out of season, when it's going good and when it's not going good, when everybody loves you and when nobody loves you. If God calls you, you're responsible all the way through. So you weather through the storm, you put yourself on the line, you do it, and it will get messy, but you never want to leave a mess. I'm at a stage right now, kind of a transition stage, where my middle son is stepping into a role of leadership, doing a great job. I'm so proud of him and blessed by him and led by him and have great faith in him, and he's teaching me. But as we go through that stage, I'm saying to him, and I'm not walking away or leaving. Excuse me. I'll be here, as far as I know, for a while. But I've always said, wherever you are, always leave it better than you found it. Always leave it better than you found it. I was talking to my former boss today. I worked many years ago as a youth pastor, and he was telling me today as we were talking, he said, Bill, when you left, you did a great job. Can I tell you something? He paid me. Because he paid me, I owed him. When it was snowing, when it was raining, when nobody else was there, my job was I got a check, so I'm going to be there. And he even said, I never saw anybody that worked as hard as you did to pour all you had into it. Now, I never thought, well, one day I'll do something else. I took all my life and just said, whatever job I'm in, I'm going to do that job as if that's the only job I've got, and I will never cheat you. I will give my 100% best I can to the place that gives me a check. And that to me was important. And so when he was telling me today, he said, I look back and I just believe that you always left things better. Well, I want to do that now. I mean, I hope I don't leave, but if I ever leave it or I ever turn that wheel over to my son, I want to make sure this church is better when I came than it was before I came. If you leave and it's worse when you leave than it was when you came, that's a real leadership issue. So put yourself on the line. Now, number 4, here's where you, after you've done the others, gather the facts, push away your feelings, put yourself on the line. Number 4 is assess why and how you got in the crisis. Now, you can't do number 4 thoroughly until you've done number 1, 2, and 3. If you don't do most people make this number 1, that's the wrong thing to do. This one should not be done until the others are done. And so after you've got the first 3 in place, now you assess. You want to ask yourself, could it have been avoided? Is there anything that we saw coming but we ignored it? Was there anything that we felt was on the horizon but we just turned a blind eye and we said, well, we won't touch it now? What systems were broken? When you go through, you want to ask yourself, were there systems that were broken? And by the way, whenever you build an organization, it begins with leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. So it all begins there. However, it's now the systems that make it grow and keep it on track. When you have bad systems, you derail a lot. When you have bad systems, the leader is always having to work twice as hard. I cannot tell you how important it is to have good systems. Now, your systems will change as you grow. Your systems will also sometimes show you that there are flaws. Your systems need to be constantly tweaked. But without a system, you're not going anywhere. Fact is that sometimes we build on the excellence of the people. That's not a good way to build. The way you want to build is on the excellence of the systems. See, if you just build on the excellence of the people, you get a good person, and they come into an organization, we have a tendency to rely on them. Well, what happens if they die or they fall or they're not there? The moment that happens, you got to start all over it. The whole house collapsed. I've known churches that had youth pastors or staff members, that those staff members never saw the value of creating systems or replacements or people beside them. And then what happens is the moment something happens to them, it falls. Now, a lower level leader likes that. I knew of a pastor one time that told me, he said, when I left that church, it died. And he thought I was supposed to commend him like he was the growth engine. I was like, man, you didn't do it right. If you do it right, it ought to keep growing when you're through. That's the goal. The goal is it's never about you. It's empowering others. And so if you do it right, see, you have 2 kinds of leaders. You have one leader that develops followers. Anybody can do that just about. The highest level of leader develops leaders. The more they're growing, the more they're doing, the further you can go. And so you got to assess, could it have been avoided? When I looked at our situation, I said, yes, it could have been avoided. I was never informed, and I highly trusted people to do their ministry and monitor things on their own, and I shouldn't have. Then I also realized we didn't have good systems in place. We had a system like it was a purchase order system where if you needed something, you signed a PO, somebody looked at it, and that's how it checked. Those systems, we had them in name only. They were not using those systems. And so, therefore, this crisis came on us, grew probably over about a 8 or 9 month period, but it only got worse. And there came a time, I'll tell you what I learned out of that also. The financial secretary at one time would not stay in her office. And I loved her to death, but she wouldn't stay in her office. She was out in the hallway all the time talking and meeting people and seeing how they stay and fellowshipping. And then there came a time when we got behind financially. She was still outside. She was not in her office. And here's why. She was out of her office then because she didn't want to be around that phone, because the phone was ringing. People wouldn't know why they weren't paid. So initially what she started as fellowship became something that she had to do. And so we had a lot of systems broken. It could have been avoided. So that's the question. Now, after you've done that, that's why every one of these are in strategic order. You have to follow every one. Like a puzzle, if you get one of these out of order, it'll mess up the whole program. Number 5, create 2 plans. Create 2 plans. This is not a one plan if you're in the mess. Number 1 is recovery. How do I adjust? Now, how do I get this boat to stop leaking? How do I stop the bleeding? And that's the first thing you've got to do is the recovery side. If you're in an automobile, out of control, first thing you want to do is quickly learn how to get back on the road. Now, then you can do the other things. Now, I would say to you, go thoroughly over what's my recovery strategy, and then as you're doing that, then start planning what's my next level of operation. How am I going to do some things now that put things in place so we don't get back here again? I've always said, even about that crisis, and by the way, I never told the church about any of it. I waited 1 year. 1 year later, when we were totally out of the situation, then I informed the church where we were a year back. And it got a lot of feedback. Some was good, some was not. Some of it was, you should have told us. We would have all helped as a church. And I said, no, it's not your job. My job, I hired the staff. I have that responsibility. It was my leadership that got us into it. So they did not need to pay for my mistake. So that was the first thing. The second was that I had some people that I had, particularly one friend that just was furious with me, angry, very wealthy man that said, I thought we were friends. That was his words. And I said, we were, and still are, I hope. He said, you should have told me. He said, I could have written you one check and paid that $755,000 just like that. He said, you didn't have to tell anybody. You should have told me. And I said, because you're my friend, and I know you would have, I wanted you to know I'm not there for your money. So no, I would never ask you. I would never rely on you to support me. So that's not going to happen. So it was my mess. I get to clean it up. I learned from it. I grew from it. And if you can accept that, we can move on as friends. And he did, but I understand what he was saying. If there's somebody with a good heart that wants to help you and you don't inform them, sure, they're going to want to know, why didn't you tell me? I could have helped you. And that was, in his eyes, he was asking the right question. From my eyes, it was important that I did it my way. Now, number 6, while you're in the mess, number 6, don't forget the big picture. If you have a knee-jerk reaction, it'll only make matters worse. In the middle of that, it wasn't so much the crisis, it was figuring out the crisis, the recovery plan, but keeping in mind, what is the main mission? What is it that we're supposed to do? Because if you get off mission, you get off course, it doesn't matter what kind of distraction or what kind of problem or crisis, it doesn't matter. Off mission is off mission. As a church, we're facing that now. I see it now. It's kind of the thing that I always say, when you get change, change means when you get a lot, when momentum comes, that's wonderful. It's great to get momentum. And you want to keep your eyes on and work at and fuel and find momentum. You can get a lot more done with momentum than you can without it, okay? We call it Big Mo. That's your friend. Best friend you got in your work is Big Mo. However, momentum can also become your downfall, because once you got momentum, it's like winning the lottery. You can spend it any way you want. So what you have to understand is, when I got momentum, what strategic changes do I need to make with this momentum? How do I do that? And not just take it and go wild with it, not like the kid in the candy store, but now we use our momentum to strategically get us to the next level. And so I always realize that the mission is the main thing. When the church stops doing the mission, God moves on. He'll go somewhere else. He's more interested in somebody that follows his agenda and goes after his mission than he is all of our ideas and our newfound trends and all that stuff. So make sure that in the midst of the crisis, after you've done the other 5, don't forget the big picture. Number 7, and I mentioned I'm moving through it quickly, but this is enough gold that I promise you'll use it forever. Be responsible. Own everything. Here's the deal. When you're going through it, it's on you. I mean, somebody's got to own up to it. So you got to stop and say, okay, I'm going to take total responsibility for getting us out of this. And I'm not blaming, but I'm going to get total responsibility for getting my hands on the wheel, and I'm going to own it. My fault. And there's something freeing about knowing it's on you. Then you can say to God, will you help me and get the deliverance you need? When a company is not in a crisis, if there's no crisis at all right now in your organization, if there's no crisis, my suggestion is stay in your zone, stay in your lane, stay in what you do, stay in your role, stay in your department. Don't get out and mingle in all the others or interfere with them. If you're not in a crisis right now and you're moving, then keep doing your job and your job only. That's the best advice I give. However, when you're in a crisis, now you got to let priority dictate. Now you rush to the edge. Now everybody steps out of their role some. Here's what I found that was interesting. When we went through that crisis, we had probably, I'm going to say, 75 to 80 staff at that time, full-time paid staff. And we went through that crisis. There were people that never owned anything, never were responsible anyway, that I found out later. But basically, they stepped back and said, "Not my fault. You know, I'm not dealing with it." And there was some like that just basically they did stay in their lane when the crisis came. They want to make sure I didn't do it. Don't blame me. I'm not there. And they backed off so far, and then thank God there were others that were different. So that's number 7. Now let me give you number 8. Number 8 is going to kind of be one of your best things for knowing how to go forward. Watch the response of every team member. Watch the response. When you're in the crisis, watch how they respond. In our situation, some jumped out. They bailed. Some of them sent out resumes to other churches, and they got them another church, and they packed their bags. They were out of here. In fact, what's funny is we had about 3 that were well known in the church because they were public figures. People saw the face. They didn't even resign publicly. They didn't tell the people, "Thank you for all the years you helped me." They just got in their car and hightailed it out of town. They showed you right then, I'm in it for me, okay? That's what they did, and they left me. And I'm looking around the room, I'm saying, my soul, you know, y'all were all on board. We were rah-rah around here and buddy-buddy and kumbaya all the time, as long as it was going good. But the minute we hit the crisis, I'm looking around and saying, where'd everybody go? You know, I mean, I felt like I could have put everybody in my car in a 4-seater car and they could all fit in the front seat. I really felt alone. Now, here's what's good, though. I did have some staff that I will to this day appreciate. I had one staff member that came in that was very low-key, didn't say anything. He said, "Pastor, I want to help you pay some of those bills." I said, "No, this is my ball." "No, I'm going to." I said, "No." And that joker reached over there and grabbed a bunch of the bills that I had organized, grabbed a handful of them, and ran out the door. And I have never had that kind of response. I thought, you know, he disobeyed me, didn't do what I said, ran out the door, and lo and behold, he went and paid. And I even thanked him for that later. I said, "You know something, if you're going to violate my instruction, that was a good instruction." He just didn't want to see me go through it alone, and I appreciate that. I want you to remember the words of Maya Angelou, one of the best statements you'll ever hear in your life, and you can go to bank on this one. When people show you who they are, believe them. When people show you who they are, believe them. My wife and I live by that philosophy a lot. In fact, a while back, somebody made the comment, and they've done it 2 or 3 times, and I didn't quite have the best feel of trust. And then when they made this comment, my wife looked at them and in my presence said, "I believe you." And I thought, whoa, that's strong. She was saying, they showed me, I believe them. When people show you who they really are, believe them. Our tendency is not to believe them. our tendency is to say, no, they don't mean that. No, they couldn't do that. No, they wouldn't. No. They just showed you. We oftentimes don't learn to read or discern like we should. And then we get blindsided and say, well, I can't believe they did that to me. I can't believe that happened. And we've learned how to become a victim when we didn't need to be because we weren't listening. And I tell you very carefully, listen. Listen for the sound of honor. I've shared that before. Evaluate what they do, the fruit behind them, whether they own things or whether they blame. Listen. The more you listen, the old joke is God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth because we ought to listen twice as much as we speak. I say it all the time to singles, if you're dating, my soul and body, it's not that hard to find to find the right one if you're willing to get rid of all the bad ones. And some people go through a dating stage for a long time, and I thank God they're listening. But you've got to listen. And if you suddenly get a red flag, you don't have to ask why it's there. Okay, you don't. If I'm driving down the road and there's a sign that says "Warning, stop ahead," I don't have to say, "Well, why did they put that sign there? I don't understand that. This road looks good to me." When I see that sign, I realize somebody is telling me ahead I've got to stop. I've got to be discerning. So if you will listen carefully to those around you, not try to judge. I'm not saying go up and say, let me look for something bad. But when you sense something, whether it's a value that you do not share, whether it's a philosophy you don't agree with, whether it's a belief, whatever it is, the moment you sense that, I wouldn't think that way, I wouldn't do that, I don't think that's healthy, the moment you hear it, mark it. Paul said that. Paul didn't say you kick everybody out of the church or all that stuff. He just said mark those. And that means just identify. This is where they are. This is how far they'll go, whatever. So it helped me when I went through the crisis more than anything to look around at staff, and I realized who's going to make the journey and who wouldn't make the journey. I wish I could tell you that I was dead on. I wasn't. I was a little surprised by some people that I said, I thought they were on board. But I was also surprised by some people that I'd never been that close to that stuck with and stayed through. So be very careful about the outer appearance and what they say verbally, because sometimes the crisis is the best thing for you to show you who's really there and who's not. And that's my hope, because one day you will go through some storms. We all do, okay? When you do, this lesson is going to be the one I want you to go back, pull out, follow the guideline, and when you do, I promise you, it'll help to get you to a better place where you can get back to doing ministry the way that you intended to do it. So my hope is that you'll do it. I thank you again for letting me teach you today, and together we're growing.